How's it going, everybody? This is Double Wide 6, and today we're looking at a generator. I got this generator from Harbor Freight, and you can get it either at a Harbor Freight store if there's one located by you, or you can get it at harborfreight.com. Basically, this is the biggest generator that Harbor Freight sells, and it's made basically to have 7,000 running watts and 8750 maximum watts. And there's actually two units that Harbor Freight sells. One of them that are both the same size. One is actually made for California because of their standards as far as pollution, and from what I understand, it has a carburetor that basically lets in a little bit less fuel, and therefore there's a cleaner exhaust, less damaging emissions. But basically what you have on these things is you have running watts and maximum watts. If you run an appliance such as like a refrigerator, basically it might have 700 running watts. That means when it's up and running, it's 700 watts. Now, when you first plug in the refrigerator and the compressor turns on, it might have a higher, what they call starting watt. So instead of starting at 700, it might require 1200 watts for a few seconds until it takes over and gets down to like 700 watts, which would be what it normally runs on. So anyhow, let's take a look at this thing. I'm real happy with it. It looks very well built. There's an on-off switch here. There's also electric start. It does not come with a battery. You'd have to get like a motorcycle battery for it. This is a cigarette lighter, so any devices that you want to charge up in an emergency, you could do that. It has a breaker here that you can reset if it trips, and other resets here. All of these buttons look to be pretty decent looking buttons, not real cheap or anything. You can see you have your standard 120 volt outlets there, 1, 2. Under this flap, these lock down in case it's outside to keep it wet. I mean to keep it from getting wet. So you get 4 120 outlets. Up here you have an AC 120/240 outlet, and that's the one that I run with, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then down here you have like an RV 3-prong 120 volt outlet. So you have all these nice rubber caps. Keep in mind when you run a device like this, it should be outdoors. You're not supposed to run it in your garage. It should be outside, away from the house, away from the occupants. Don't have any accidents with a generator like this. So anyhow, this thing is very well built. I think it weighs 200 pounds. Real solid steel frame, nicely welded up. From what I've heard, the engine on it is what they would call a Honda clone engine, and basically the engine, from what I understand, was basically built by using molds that Honda once used. So whether they're the exact same molds or exact same replicas of Honda engines, the engine's cast exactly the same as the Hondas. But I like it. It really looks good. It looks well built. This is the pull start recoil here. Nice heavy rope. This is a fuel shutoff, so you can run it out of fuel, and that way your carburetor won't be gummed up. Has an air filter on it. I noticed the only issue I had is when I tried to start it the first day, the sticker was actually on upside down here, because I've labeled this to choke the carburetor. It has to go to the left, and once it starts, then you move this to the right, where the sticker's actually backwards. It shows the choke the other way, so I think it got put on upside down. One other thing that I wanted to mention about this particular generator is they do sell a wheel kit at Harbor Freight that's pretty flimsy and cheap. So they sell this cart here. I think I got the cart for about $40, maybe a little less. And it's like a perfect fit for the generator. It'll fit right on there. In the post of this video, I'll put I'll list the cart number so that you know what Harbor Freight item that is. Anyhow, it really looks like a nice machine. It starts fairly easy. I mean, you got to pull on it because it is a, I don't know, what is it, 12 or 14 horsepower motor or something. But it does start easy. I'm not a fan of the metal tank because if you leave fuel in there, I have seen metal gas tanks rust, so I wouldn't leave fuel in there. You can drain the fuel out or you can burn it out. I think this thing can hold up to like 10 or 12 hours of fuel, so running at like 50% or something. I'm using this to power my entire house, and I've hooked it into the panel. I'm going to show you guys what needs to be done to hook it to the panel professionally and up to code and all that stuff. So we'll talk about that in another video. The only other bad thing that I've heard about these Honda engines is a lot of the rubber and plastic components that they put on these machines compared to Honda. They're cheaper plastics, and eventually they get brittle and break down, particularly things such as carburetor gaskets and fuel lines, things like that. They will eventually deteriorate. So Harbor Freight does have parts for these things. The only problem is you got to get them through Harbor Freight. I believe you could use Honda parts if you wanted to. I'm not exactly positive if they would fit exact, but I have a feeling that they might. I've gotten parts through Harbor Freight before, not for this machine, but it does take, I think, about 8 weeks for the parts to arrive at your house, so it does take a while to get them. But I'm real happy with this purchase. I think it was about $600. I think it was $636, and I didn't get it shipped. I picked it up at the store, and I wish we had it during Hurricane Sandy, and we didn't. And now I am completely prepared for that type of event in the future. So I'm going to now start it up so you can hear it run. Another thing I wanted to mention is the video. The generator runs fairly quietly. My neighbor has one. It's not nearly as loud. He has a Generac, but this is a big generator. I think it's rated at about, it's like 72 or 76 decibels, somewhere in there, I believe is what it's rated. So I haven't had this thing started in over a month. I'm going to start it up. We'll do a cold start. You can listen to it. I'll let it run a little bit, and then you can check out Double Wide 6. I have a video on how it's hooked up to the panel. One other thing I wanted to mention is you can run this thing outside and plug extension cords into it and bring the extension cords into your house, or you can have it hooked up to your panel. If you hook it up to your panel, you're going to need an extension cord. So down here I've got a 10 gauge 25 foot extension cord, and this extension cord is real heavy duty, and basically it has this 4-prong plug, and that plugs into the AC 240 volt outlet, and then that ties into my inlet, which brings it into my breaker. So we're going to start this thing up, and we'll see how she runs. One other thing that I forgot to mention is when you buy a generator, you want to size it up with your house. My house is about 2,700 square feet, so basically for my house, I have central air and central heat, Well, this machine most likely won't be running that in an emergency. I do have a propane fireplace, so I could run that with the blower fan to keep warm. I can run a well pump with this thing. I can run like pretty much all the lights in the house. You just don't want to run them all at once. And you know, the refrigerators, the freezers. We could probably do a load of laundry and possibly run the dryer. I have an 80-gallon hot water heater. Well, a hot water heater is just a whole new ball game for you. This thing is not going to be able to power the hot water heater, so you know, that'll be off. You could do a toaster, you could do a coffee pot, you can run a microwave, but you just don't want to run everything at once. And the best thing to do is look at your appliances, figure out how many watts they have for starting and running, and do a little bit of calculation before you go out and get yourself a generator. It's also important to know that a generator should be run. If you just let them sit for like 5-6 years, what can happen is, number one, the carburetor will get all gunked up if there's fuel in it, and number two, the magnets inside there, inside the generator, basically will end up canceling themselves out. All right, so they like lose their magnetic field. So what you're supposed to do is start this thing about once every 2 or 3 months and just let it run for a little bit. So if you do have one, it's going to require some of that maintenance as well. Just something to keep in mind. That's her running, and I'm telling you, that's a cold start. She starts right up. So it's a nice machine, and I'm double wide 6. You want to look for my next video on how to wire this thing up to the breaker panel. Thanks for watching.